If you've opened a newspaper or flicked onto a news programme in the last couple of days, you would have seen that an 11th hour intervention by the European Court of Human Rights put a hold on the much-anticipated flight to Rwanda for illegal immigrants. Activists and immigration lawyers failed to have the flight halted when they took the case to the High Court last Friday. The judge there said there was material public interest in allowing the Home Secretary to go ahead with the policy. He was not convinced that there was any evidence migrants would be mistreated or that their human rights would be contravened if that first flight went ahead as planned. Our own Court of Appeal then upheld this judgment just a few days later, and it would be just half an hour before the flight was due to take off that the overreaching arm of the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR, would swoop in and put a hold on takeoff and in the process give a slap in the face to those in the nation who elected a government that promises to deal with the issue of illegal immigration. Now, the debate has morphed even further, raising questions on whether Britain should seek to actually withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. It's something, actually, that former Prime Minister Theresa May fought for during her tenure as Home Secretary. The ECHR was the thorn in her side that prevented her from getting on with the job of enforcing British justice and securing the nation. Islamist extremist, for example, Abu Hamza, had his extradition severely delayed for years because of the ECHR. The European Court also nearly stopped radical cleric Abu Qatada from being deported. The government have often found themselves fighting tooth and nail to deport terrorists and foreign criminals from British streets because those dangerous individuals have claimed it breaches their human rights under the European Convention. While speaking out in favour of pulling out of the ECHR, Theresa May once said this, and I quote, "The ECHR can bind the hands of Parliament, adds nothing to prosperity, makes us less secure by preventing the deportation of dangerous foreign criminals, and does nothing to change the attitudes of governments like Russia's when it comes to human rights." And she's right, isn't she? Russia and Ukraine signed up to the ECHR a quarter of a century ago, and as of the end of last year, a quarter of applications awaiting allocation in the courts were from Russia. Of course, Russia was expelled in March upon its invasion of Ukraine. But my question is this: how have decades' worth of being in the European rights body exactly helped the situation? I'd suggest you ask the people who have been harmed by Russian bombs and gunfires. Well, look, there's something that needs to be called out as well. The absolute hysteria around the consequences of leaving the ECHR. Here's something else Prime Minister Theresa May said. She said, "This is Great Britain, the country of Magna Carta, parliamentary democracy, and the fairest courts in the world, and we can protect human rights ourselves in a way that doesn't jeopardise national security or bind the hands of Parliament." Human rights and freedoms have a deep, centuries-old root in Britain. We were the first country to actually ratify this European Convention on Human Rights in 1951, of course, after Winston Churchill was amongst the first to propose a Council of Europe to uphold citizens' rights. I find the idea that the British legislature and judiciary would be conspiring to roll back human rights, frankly, quite offensive. Leaving the ECHR does not mean we will be less free. Were we a bastion of tyranny and oppression before 1998, when the ECHR was brought into British domestic law? No, we were not. And those suggesting that leaving the ECHR would leave us as pariahs on the global stage, and those even suggesting we would become more like Russia, are either being disingenuous, deceitful, or downright idiotic. In fact, I would ask those people, is Australia not a free, civil, Western democracy? Because Australia has no National Bill of Rights. There's no Human Rights Act there. One argument made for this in Australia has been, guess what? Because it would empower unelected judges over elected representatives. And, in fact, Australia rates higher than the UK on the Democracy Index, published by the Economist Intelligence Unit annually, an index which measures civil liberties and political culture in countries. It ranks 9th, Australia does, whilst the UK ranks in 18th place. Australia also, if you remember, managed to curb illegal boat crossings, something we have not yet managed to do. No thanks this time to the ECHR. We heard many times throughout the Brexit referendum of bringing in an Australian-based, points-based immigration system, Australian-style immigration system. And this was, of course, in relation to legal migration. But perhaps, just perhaps, we should further emulate Australia's approach, both for illegal immigration and for taking full control of our rights.